It's time for this week's market report. Today we're breaking down the numbers from the annual cattle inventory report. And spring is just around the corner, but this fierce winter has taken its toll on cattle producers. And the African swine flu is an ocean away, but could the disease have any impacts here at home? We'll talk about all that and more with Dr. Lee Schulz. He's a livestock economist with Iowa State University, and he joins us now. And starting off, the annual cattle inventory report, it's a highly anticipated report that was released several days ago. What are some of the high points on that report that you like to hit?
Well, I think first and foremost, it was, for the most part, as expected. We've seen inventories larger in the categories that we expected larger. So the all cattle and calves number was larger. This was the fifth consecutive year in a row of that, so really continued that expansionary phase there. Beef cow numbers were 1% higher. Dairy cow numbers were about 1% lower. Maybe the surprise in the report, if you could find one, was the heifers for beef cow replacement. So these would be the heifers that will be entering as beef cow numbers. That number was expected smaller, actually about 4.3% smaller, and only we've seen it 3% smaller. So it was 1% difference in the expectations compared to the actual. I think that really resulted from markets are a little bit better than we kind of anticipated, I think, as we've seen markets shape up for 2009. Calf and feeder cattle prices look to hold. Fed cattle prices still remain relatively strong. So I think maybe that caused producers to hold on to a few more heifers than maybe we thought they would have the last couple of months. We've seen relatively strong replacement heifer prices. So I think we had an indication that that number wasn't going to really fall off as much as maybe it could have.
And then taking what we know with this report, then the other reports that came out in February, does that change how producers need to approach their marketing decisions in the coming months?
I don't think too much has changed, and really it's because when we seen the government shutdown and kind of delay of those reports, what was still being released was the price reporting of that data, and so we didn't really miss any of the price discovery in that process. What we're catching up on is now a lot of the production data, but I think that is pretty in line with where we expected it to be as we see that data filter in. I would remind really producers, regardless of what we pick up in these trends, that your marketing plan really should be to reduce risk, and that is to limit losses and increase the probability of a profit. So how can you do that? Really, it's controlling what you can control on your farm. So it's your farm's costs as well as your price risk management plan. And so when there's opportunities for profits, like we see in cattle feeding right now for the first really 6-7 months of 2019, I think it's an opportunity there to hedge those prices, to put some protection in the form of price floors through options to really increase that probability of a profit. We see similar scenario for the hog industry. Really, May through October look to be seasonally higher prices as well as profitable prices for those operations.
All right, good advice for sure. And moving on to weather, here in Nebraska, we're expecting it to get warmer one of these days. I know it's been brutal for you guys in Iowa as well. Could you give us some insight into what impacts the weather is having on the cattle market and what we could still see?
Well, I think we are seeing some impact when you look at animal performance with the cold weather, and really I think now as it maybe starts to heat up a little bit, you're going to see to deal with the wet weather as well. And so animal performance, I think there's an impact. I think you could say that cattle weights have been at least curbed, and so we maybe didn't see the heights of the weights we could have seen if weather would have been a little bit better, and so that has impacted the amount of beef production a little bit. I think really the big impact that we did see was on one, placement decision. So I think given the polar vortex we've seen, I think we did see some auction markets close. We've seen less ability to transport that animals. And so I think that's backed up with the cattle inventory report that said those feeder cattle supplies are larger. And so I think they're sitting on farms right now looking to go to feedlots. We're likely to see some placement numbers really ramp up here the next couple of months. And so that could pressure feeder cattle prices some.
Yeah, always blame it on the polar vortex for sure. You touched on hogs a second ago. I wanted to get back to that, and specifically African swine fever. And this has been causing a lot of trouble for China's pork industry. Could you give us an update on that and how that could have any ripple effects over here in the U.S. market possibly?
So we continue to get bits of information out of China and routine updates of both new cases as well as how they're dealing with the ongoing cases. And really there's been a lot of numbers thrown out there of about 100 million hogs impacted in China, or at least removed from the Chinese herd for the first year of the impact. I think really right now where prices are in China, there hasn't been a real noticeable impact, but it's likely to occur as we get into the second and third quarter, where really there's going to be a hole in that pork production. I think it's going to be really key to see how consumers react to that in China, because with that hole in production, prices will be larger, will be higher, and if demand remains where it's at, that means that prices will maintain at those levels. Now, if demand wanes a little bit, you could see prices not escalate to the levels that we think. And if demand wanes enough, we could not maybe see even much of a price inflation impact in China.
All right, Dr. Lee Schulz, we appreciate it. We'll do it again real soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.